In the sophisticated world of modern Parisian gastronomy, Philippe Moreau considered himself a guardian of the highest culinary standards. As senior waiter at the renowned Le Ciel Bleu, he thought he was simply maintaining the tradition of excellence. By refusing to serve an ordinary-looking man who dared to enter without a reservation on a rainy Thursday evening. With his impeccable uniform, military posture, and decades of experience in Michelin-starred establishments, Philippe had no idea he had just committed the most expensive mistake of his career. The man before him was Antonio Barisi, the most feared and influential food critic in the country, a man whose words held the absolute power to transform an unknown chef into an international celebrity or permanently close the doors of a century-old restaurant. A single review from him could be worth millions in revenue or losses. And on that stormy night, Philippe had just served Barisi much more than a table refusal. He had delivered a pure and crystal-clear sample of Le Ciel Bleu's true soul. What happened in the next 48 hours would change not only the fate of the city's most exclusive restaurant, but forever transform the lives of everyone who worked there, especially that of an arrogant waiter who was about to learn the most important lesson of his career. Le Ciel Bleu wasn't merely a restaurant, it was a true cathedral of contemporary French gastronomy. Strategically located in the pulsing heart of the city, it occupied the top floor of a historic 19th-century building, offering a privileged and breathtaking view of the Central Park through its panoramic tempered glass windows. Every detail of the environment had been meticulously planned by international designers, walls covered in warm cream tones, decorated with contemporary artworks valued at hundreds of thousands of euros, and majestic Czech crystal chandeliers that bathed the space in golden, welcoming light. The tables, covered with imported Egyptian linen, were arranged with geometric precision, each perfectly distanced from the others to guarantee absolute privacy for the conversations of the most illustrious clients. The restaurant proudly carried 2 Michelin stars earned through years of tireless dedication, but harbored an ambition that consumed the team's dreams and nightmares: the conquest of the 3rd star, the holy grail of the culinary world, a recognition that only 137 restaurants on the entire planet possessed. It was more than prestige. It was culinary immortality. Philippe Moreau, at 38 years old, represented the personification of traditional French hospitality elevated to the extreme. He didn't consider himself a simple waiter. That word wasn't even part of his professional vocabulary. He was a maître d'hôtel, an artist of gastronomic experience, a maestro who conducted every movement of the dining room with surgical precision and diplomatic elegance. With 2 decades of experience accumulated in Europe's most prestigious restaurants, from Paris to Monte Carlo, from London to Rome, Philippe had developed a standard of excellence that bordered on obsession. His graying hair at the temples was kept perfectly trimmed by an exclusive barber who visited weekly. His French accent, cultivated with academic precision, skillfully disguised his humble origins in an industrial town just 100 kilometers away. Colleagues respectfully called him Le General behind his back, a reference both to his impeccable military efficiency and his absolutely unquestionable inflexibility when it came to service protocols and standards. Philippe deeply believed that exclusivity was the essence of true luxury hospitality. On that rainy Thursday autumn evening, Philippe supervised the evening preparations with his habitual obsessive meticulousness, personally adjusting every piece of silverware that was 2 millimeters out of perfect alignment, checking the shine of every crystal glass under the soft light of the chandeliers, ensuring that every napkin was folded in the exact geometric form he had learned in his first weeks at the Hotel Ritz, 15 kilometers away. In the modest but cozy apartment of a quiet residential neighborhood, Antonio Baresi was meticulously preparing for what would prove to be an absolutely historic night, though he didn't know it yet. At 52 years old, he carried on his shoulders the weight and responsibility of being considered the most influential and respected voice in national food criticism. Baresi was a true living legend in culinary circles, feared and revered equally by renowned chefs, millionaire restaurant owners, and even international critics themselves. His analyses in the prestigious magazine Authentic Gourmet and on his personal blog The Honest Palate were awaited monthly like verdicts that could instantly elevate an establishment to worldwide stardom or mercilessly condemn it to absolute commercial oblivion, completely contrary to the glamorous and pretentious image many had of him. Baresi maintained a private life of almost monastic simplicity. He was the son of humble Italian immigrants who began their lives in the new country, with a small family pizzeria in the suburbs. This origin had profoundly shaped his character. He developed an extraordinarily refined palate through decades of study, but maintained a visceral aversion to any kind of unnecessary pretension or social arrogance. He always dressed discreetly, but impeccably well-groomed, preferred public transportation to the luxury cars he could easily afford, and religiously followed a professional rule he considered sacred, always visiting restaurants completely anonymously. He used to repeat like a personal mantra, "The truth of the dish doesn't change if the chef knows who's going to eat it, but the authenticity of service certainly changes when they know who's being served." On that specific night, while carefully adjusting his simple but perfectly pressed navy blue shirt, Baresi consulted his detailed notes about Le Ciel Bleu. The restaurant had recently changed executive chefs, hiring the young and extremely ambitious Gabriel Mendes, who publicly promised to revolutionize the already world-acclaimed classic French cuisine. It was exactly the type of bold and potentially transformative promise that Baresi felt the professional need to verify personally, without warnings or special privileges. At exactly 7:45 p.m., Le Ciel Bleu was already pulsing intensely with the sophisticated and elegant energy characteristic of a high-class restaurant in full and glorious operation. The main dining room gleamed like a theatrical stage under the golden light of the chandeliers, while carefully selected clients enjoyed gastronomic experiences that cost the equivalent of many workers' monthly salaries. Outside, the rain that had begun the day as a fine and romantic drizzle now poured from the sky in violent and relentless torrents, creating a liquid curtain that made the panoramic view of the city through the enormous windows even more cinematic and dramatic. The contrast between the welcoming warmth of the luxurious interior and nature's fury outside created an almost theatrical atmosphere of protection and exclusivity. It was in this epic setting that Antonio Baresi made his discreet entrance through the main hall, gently shaking a traditional black umbrella he had inherited from his father. His dark blazer of medium quality was visibly damp at the broad shoulders, and his graying hair showed slight dishevelment from the persistent humidity and strong winds that accompanied the storm. Absolutely nothing in his physical appearance, body posture, or clothing remotely suggested that he was the man whose written words possessed the almost supernatural power to determine the financial destiny, international reputation, and commercial future of an establishment of Le Ciel Bleu's caliber and prestige. Philippe, who at that specific moment was personally supervising the elegant reception while Mater Bernard ceremoniously accompanied a couple of millionaire regular clients to the premium reserve table, immediately executed his automatic professional evaluation of the newcomer. It was a mental process he had perfected over 2 decades, instant analysis of clothing, accessories, posture, body language, and all external signs of socioeconomic status. The verdict was quick and merciless. Medium quality clothing purchased at conventional stores. total absence of expensive accessories or brand distinctions, body posture too relaxed for the environment's rigorous standards, absence of companions who could validate social status. His facial expression, normally maintained and studied professional. Neutrality, hardened almost imperceptibly, signaling disapproval before even a single word was spoken. Asterisk. "Good evening, sir. May I help you?" Felipe asked, employing a tone of artificial politeness he had perfected for situations exactly like this. Polite on the surface, but loaded with subtle signals of superiority and distance. Baresi responded, with a naturally polite smile, completely oblivious to the silent judgment he had just suffered. "Good evening. I would very much like a table for one, please." Felipe's cold gaze briefly descended to the electronic tablet in his manicured hands, though he already knew perfectly what his response would be. It was a theatrical gesture designed to demonstrate he was checking availability. "Do you have a confirmed reservation?" "No, unfortunately." It was a completely last-minute decision, Baresi responded with genuine honesty, not realizing that this answer only confirmed all of Felipe's negative suspicions about his type of client. Felipe deliberately extended the silence for exactly 3 seconds longer than would be socially natural, a small but perceptible signal of disapproval he had learned to use as a psychological tool of discouragement. "I deeply regret to inform you that we are completely booked tonight, sir. Le Ciel Bleu is an establishment extraordinarily sought after by a very specific clientele. We always recommend, without exception, making reservations with at least 2 weeks minimum advance notice." The tone employed was precisely the same that a condescending teacher would use to explain elementary concepts to a particularly slow child. Baresi, who had dedicated entire decades of his professional career to analyzing not just food, but also all aspects of service and hospitality, instantly caught every subtle nuance, every vocal inflection, and every micro-expression of that revealing interaction. When Baresi politely pointed to 2 clearly empty tables in the farthest corner of the main dining room, Felipe blatantly lied about them being reserved for clients who simply haven't arrived yet. One of the tables was actually reserved for 8:30 p.m., but the other was strategically maintained as a safety table, exclusively to accommodate unexpected VIP clients or resolve last-minute emergencies. A standard practice in luxury restaurants, but one that would never be openly admitted to unwanted clients. The subliminal message was crystal clear and brutal. This simply wasn't an appropriate place for people of Baresi's social caliber. Felipe had transformed hospitality into an instrument of exclusion and class judgment. Baresi calmly left for the storm that now raged with full force, but didn't follow Felipe's condescending suggestion to try the more appropriate bistro Riviere located 2 blocks ahead. Instead, he deliberately walked to his modest sedan parked strategically 1 block away, sat in the driver's seat, and opened his professional laptop with the silent determination of a general preparing a decisive battle. The car's interior instantly transformed into a mobile office illuminated by the ghostly blue light of the computer screen. Raindrops still clung stubbornly to the fibers of his dark blazer, and his graying hair maintained the casual dishevelment caused by the storm's persistent humidity. But his brown eyes revealed laser-focused concentration, while his experienced fingers began to dance across the keyboard. The first words appeared on the screen like a judicial sentence. Le Ciel Bleu, where the sky is blue only for some. Tonight, before even having the opportunity to taste a single dish from the world-acclaimed creations of Chef Gabriel Mendez, I learned absolutely everything I needed to know about the true philosophical essence and fundamental values of Le Ciel Bleu. Each sentence that followed was constructed with the surgical precision of a language master who knew exactly the devastating power of his words. Baresi wasn't just writing a review. He was creating a historical document that would be studied for years as the definitive example of how a single interaction can reveal the corrupted soul of an entire institution. What Felipe didn't understand, in his blind arrogance, was that he had just involuntarily offered the country's most influential critic the purest and unfiltered sample of the restaurant's true operational philosophy, not through elaborate dishes or expensive wines, but through the raw and honest demonstration of how they treated human beings who didn't correspond to their arbitrary standards of social adequacy. The following morning dawned with a deceptive quietude that precedes earthquakes. Chef Gabriel Mendez arrived at Le Ciel Bleu before 7 a.m., following his invariable morning routine of the last 6 months. At 35 years old, he represented the personification of modern culinary talent combined with strategic ambition. A true prodigy who had conquered his first Michelin star at the impressive age of 29, becoming one of the brightest promises of contemporary French gastronomy. Gabriel had been hired by owner Helena Vasconcelos with a crystalline and non-negotiable mission: elevate Le Ciel Bleu to the world gastronomic Olympus through the conquest of the third Michelin star. It was a responsibility worth millions in potential revenue and represented the difference between being just an excellent restaurant and entering culinary history. Unlike the cinematic stereotype of the temperamental and explosive chef, Gabriel possessed a methodical, calculating personality intensely focused on results. He had grown up in a working-class family from the countryside and fought for every opportunity in his meteoric career, developing a deep respect for all staff in the culinary hierarchy, from dishwashers to the most experienced sous chefs. His phone rang at 8:15 a.m. with the urgency characteristic of bad news. It was Helena Vasconcelos, whose normally controlled and aristocratic voice now carried a tone of desperate panic that Gabriel had never witnessed. "Gabriel, we need to talk. Immediately. This is an absolute emergency." 15 minutes later, Gabriel found himself in Helena's private office, located on the mezzanine with panoramic view of the main dining room. The 58-year-old woman, always impeccably dressed and possessing a regal posture inherited from generations of French aristocrats, seemed to have aged an entire decade during a single sleepless night. Her elegant hands trembled almost imperceptibly, while holding a tablet as if it were a bomb about to explode. On the screen, open like an exposed wound, was Antonio Barisi's blog, The Honest Palate. The review's title gleamed like an epitaph: Le Ciel Bleu, where the sky is blue only for some. "Read" was the only word Helena could pronounce, her voice hoarse from an entire night without sleep. Gabriel took the tablet and physically felt his stomach plummet into free fall as he absorbed every venomous word. The critic had methodically dissected not just an isolated incident, but the restaurant's entire institutional philosophy. In an establishment that truly understands the fundamental principles of authentic hospitality, a client's intrinsic value is never measured by the ostentatious brand of his watch, the pompous status of his reservation, or the expensive cut of his clothes, but exclusively by his fundamental and inalienable human dignity. Baresi's words continued like sharp daggers hitting vital points. Le Ciel Bleu catastrophically failed not just in providing me a commercial dinner, but in something infinitely more basic and important: remembering that restaurants exist primarily to serve real people, not to arrogantly judge whether those people are socially worthy or adequate to be served. The final blow was a masterpiece of professional destruction. I will not evaluate Chef Gabriel Mendez's food at this time, as his reputation suggests genuine talent, and it would be deeply unfair to judge his culinary art when I didn't even have the opportunity to experience it. However, I must remind both the chef and readers that a restaurant represents a holistic and complete experience. The most sublime and technically perfect culinary creation instantly loses all its brilliance and meaning when served in an environment where basic human respect is an exclusive privilege reserved only for a chosen few. Asterisk, while Helena mentally calculated millions in potential losses and the irreversible destruction of a reputation built over decades, Gabriel experienced a moment of absolute clarity that would define the rest of his career. Instead of surrendering to panic or desperately seeking damage control strategies, he had an epiphany that would require almost suicidal entrepreneurial courage. He picked up his personal phone and, ignoring Helena's growing protests, dialed the number he had found on Barisi's official website. Each ring of the phone reverberated like an accelerated heartbeat, while Gabriel literally bet his entire career on a single audacious psychological gambit. Asterisk, Mr. Barisi? This is Gabriel Mendez, executive chef of Le Ciel Bleu. On the other end of the line, Barisi almost dropped his morning coffee cup. In 15 years of devastating reviews, rarely had a chef contacted him directly after a negative analysis. Most hid behind press agents or lawyers specialized in reputation crises. Chef Mendez: I confess I absolutely didn't expect your direct contact. I imagine not, Mr. Baresi. I read your review this morning before even having breakfast. And I need to say something fundamental. You were absolutely, unquestionably correct in every written word. The brutal frankness of the declaration left Baresi genuinely shocked. No attempt at justification, no corporate defense, no request for retraction or mitigation. Just total acceptance of responsibility. Gabriel continued with a determination that surprised even Helena, who watched open-mouthed. I'm not calling to apologetically apologize, though I am deeply and sincerely sorry for the degrading treatment you received at our establishment. I'm calling to make an invitation that may seem completely insane. I would like you to return to Le Ciel Bleu, not for a common reconciliation meal, but to witness something I believe to be historically unprecedented in haute cuisine. Baresi's professional curiosity was instantly captured. Unprecedented how, exactly? I'm about to completely reformulate not just our menu and culinary approach, but our entire fundamental philosophy of service and hospitality. I want you to observe this transformation process as a specialized consultant, not as a critic seeking revenge. If you're willing to give us a second chance we probably don't deserve. Asterisk 1 hour after the phone call that would enter Le Ciel Bleu's history, Gabriel convened an emergency meeting that included absolutely all staff, from kitchen team to senior waiters, passing through sommeliers, receptionists, and even cleaning personnel. It was a radical democratization that had never occurred in the restaurant's hierarchical history. From this moment, Gabriel announced with a firmness that echoed through the main dining room temporarily transformed into an auditorium, we are implementing fundamental changes that go far beyond operational adjustments. We are completely redefining who we are and why we exist as an institution. Under the attentive but visibly skeptical gaze of Felipe, who maintained himself rigidly in military position at the back of the room, Gabriel outlined his revolutionary vision. During the next 2 experimental weeks, Le Ciel Bleu would completely abolish its reservation system, operating exclusively on a first-come, first-served basis. The tasting menu prices would be reduced by exactly 50%, making the experience accessible to a much broader range of the population. And, most radically, they would create a completely new menu called Essence, technically perfect but conceptually simple dishes that celebrated ingredients in their maximum purity, without unnecessary artifices or empty gastronomic pretensions. This is absolutely insane, Felipe protested, his voice loaded with almost religious indignation. we will inevitably attract exactly the wrong type of clientele. Our entire carefully constructed positioning of premium exclusivity, our decades-old, our EPUTITION. It's precisely this sick obsession with artificial exclusivity that brought us to the precipice's edge. Helena interrupted, who had decided to fully support Gabriel's apparently suicidal strategy after 2 hours of intense reflection. Our neurotic fixation with exclusivity made us completely forget the fundamental reason we exist: to provide memorable and transformative gastronomic experiences through the harmonious combination of exceptional food and authentic hospitality. For all human beings who appreciate this art, not just for an artificially limited elite. The team revealed itself dramatically divided. Most of the cooks, led by pastry chef Lucia, demonstrated genuine enthusiasm for the opportunity to create more inclusive gastronomy without sacrificing technical excellence. On the other hand, beholder waiters, especially those who had worked under Felipe's inflexible tutelage for years, saw the new direction as a fundamental betrayal of everything they considered sacred in high hospitality. Whoever cannot genuinely adapt to this new service philosophy, Gabriel concluded with quiet but unquestionable authority, directing his gaze straight at Felipe, will be completely free to seek professional opportunities at other establishments that maintain more traditional approaches. 24 hours after the most radical transformation in Le Ciel Blu's history, the restaurant still hadn't officially reopened to the public, but Gabriel had strategically invited Baresi to arrive 2 hours before the new operating schedule. The objective was to allow the critic to closely observe the final preparations and personally witness the sincerity of the implemented changes. Baresi entered through the main door with the same characteristic discretion as the previous night, again wearing his combination of simple but impeccably cared-for clothing. His experienced eyes, trained by decades of professional analysis, immediately caught every alteration in the environment. The strategic reorganization of tables to create greater proximity and human warmth, the softened lighting to reduce formal intimidation, and even small additional decorative elements that humanize the previously excessively austere space. Felipe, who compulsively supervised the final adjustments in the dining room, experienced a moment of total paralysis upon spotting Baresi, the man he considered personally responsible for destroying everything the restaurant had represented for decades, was now walking through the sacred space as if he were an owner inspecting his property. His jaw involuntarily contracted, his neck muscles became visibly tense, and his fingers gripped the menu folder with enough force to completely whiten his knuckles. Throughout his entire career, Felipe had operated under the absolute conviction that rigid control and selective exclusivity were the fundamental pillars of true luxury hospitality. Now he saw these principles being deliberately demolished before his eyes because of a man who had failed to understand and respect the established rules. Gabriel received Baresi with a firm handshake and a smile that combined nervousness with genuine determination. Helena joined them moments later, greeting the critic with natural respect that contrasted dramatically with the defensive attitude most owners demonstrated in similar situations. While Gabriel conducted Baresi on a detailed tour of the implemented transformations from the renovated kitchen to changes in the reservation system, Felipe watched from afar with growing internal agitation that finally reached the boiling point. 2 decades of wounded professional pride, months of accumulated frustration with Gabriel's innovations, and the public humiliation of seeing his service approach criticized worldwide created an emotional storm that could no longer be contained. Last straw was hearing Baresi sincerely praise the implemented changes and suggest they represented a natural evolution of true French hospitality. For Felipe, this wasn't evolution. It was absolute betrayal of everything he had dedicated his life to defending and perpetuating. Asterisk. Felipe abruptly abandoned his position of respectful observation and deliberately marched toward the group, interrupting the conversation mid-sentence. "Excuse me," he said with a tense but still controlled voice, each word pronounced with surgical precision. "I believe we need to discuss some fundamental practical aspects of this new philosophical direction." Gabriel immediately perceived the dangerous tone in Felipe's voice and attempted a diplomatic de-escalation. "Felipe, we can certainly address any concerns you have, but perhaps it would be more appropriate for us to discuss this privately later." "No," Felipe responded with a firmness that surprised everyone present. "I think the time has come to discuss this openly in the presence of everyone involved." Turning directly to Baresi with a look that mixed accusation and challenge, he continued, "Mr. Baresi, do you genuinely believe you're doing a benevolent favor to this historic establishment, forcing us to systematically abandon everything that made us unique and special during decades of proven excellence?" Baresi, genuinely surprised by the direct and aggressive confrontation, maintained admirable composure. "Mr. Moreau, I'm not forcing absolutely anything on anyone. I simply shared my personal experience honestly and transparently, as is my professional responsibility." But Felipe had completely surpassed the point of rational return. Years of repressed frustration exploded in a verbal avalanche. "You have the audacity to enter our establishment without a reservation, dressed as if you were simply visiting any neighborhood bar, and then become publicly offended when you don't automatically receive the VIP treatment you apparently believe you deserve? And now, because of your wounded ego and your need for personal revenge, we're being forced to completely destroy the identity and standards that took generations to build." The silence that followed was so dense and charged with tension that it seemed physically palpable. Nearby staff completely stopped their activities, watching the scene with a mixture of horror and fascination. Gabriel took a protective step forward, literally placing himself between Felipe and Baresi. "That is absolutely enough, Felipe," Gabriel said with quiet but unquestionable authority. "Go home immediately. Take the rest of the day off and use that time to seriously reflect on whether you still want to be part of this team." What happened next surprised absolutely everyone present, including Baresi himself. Instead of accepting the protection offered by Gabriel or leaving discreetly to avoid further embarrassment, the critic took a calm step toward Felipe, maintaining a respectful distance but eliminating the physical barriers between them. Asterisk, "Mr. Moreau," Baresi said with a soft but penetrating voice, "may I speak directly with you for a moment?" Felipe, still trembling slightly with accumulated rage, crossed his arms defensively but reluctantly nodded. "I deeply understand your frustration, Mr. Moreau. Genuinely understand. You've dedicated your entire career to a specific ideal of service and excellence. You've built your entire professional identity around standards you believe to be non-negotiable. And now you're seeing these foundations being publicly questioned." Baresi paused, allowing his words to penetrate. "But perhaps, just perhaps, you're unconsciously confusing genuine excellence with artificial exclusivity." Felipe momentarily looked away, but Baresi continued with almost paternal patience. "I didn't write that review for personal revenge or to satisfy some wounded ego, as you suggested. I wrote it because I believe deeply and passionately that true greatness in hospitality, the greatness that transforms a simple meal into a memorable experience that people carry in their hearts for decades, isn't fundamentally based on whom you systematically exclude from your establishment, but precisely on how you genuinely include and welcome every human being who crosses your door." Something fundamental began to waver in Felipe's facial expression, a small but perceptible crack in the armor of absolute certainty he had worn as psychological protection for so many years. Gabriel approached again, his voice loaded with sincerity, and respect. Felipe, you are indisputably one of the most talented professionals I've ever had the privilege of working with. Your obsessive attention to detail, your encyclopedic knowledge of protocol and service, your ability to orchestrate perfect gastronomic experiences, these are truly extraordinary and irreplaceable attributes. But hospitality executed without genuine human warmth, without real empathy for the client's experience, becomes just an empty and cold performance, however technically perfect it may be. Felipe finally raised his eyes and looked directly at Parisi. His voice, when it finally emerged, was notably more vulnerable. Do you really believe it's possible to maintain the highest standards of gastronomic excellence while being accessible? Democratic? Baresi smiled with genuine understanding. Not only do I believe it, Mr. Moreau, but I know it with absolute certainty. The 3 best restaurants where I've had the privilege of dining in my entire career had a common characteristic that differentiated them from all others. They made every client, from a university student saving for months for a special occasion to a millionaire CEO, feel like the most important and welcome person in the world, regardless of their bank account or social status. This doesn't represent a reduction of standards. Actually, it's an elevation of the bar to a level that very few establishments in the world manage to reach. Felipe remained silent for long seconds that seemed eternal, processing emotions and concepts that challenged 2 decades of professional conditioning. Finally, with a humility no one had ever witnessed in him, he slowly nodded. Perhaps I genuinely need to reconsider some fundamental things about what it really means to serve people. Le Ciel Blue's doors officially opened to the pions. Public punctually at 7 p.m., but without any trace of the traditional ritual of meticulous reservation verification and social status validation. Instead, a transformed team welcomed the first clients with authentically warm smiles and enthusiastic explanations about the revolutionary new concept being implemented. The first hour of operation was gloriously chaotic in a way Le Ciel Bleu had never experienced in its aristocratic history. Clients from completely diverse backgrounds continuously entered, young couples clearly on important romantic dates, animated groups of friends celebrating personal achievements, middle-class families with curious teenagers, and even a family with 2 small children, something absolutely unprecedented in that historically intimidating space. Felipe, defying all expectations and internal bets, not only assumed his traditional post but genuinely embraced his role as ambassador of the new philosophy. When a group of 4 young professionals entered, obviously friends coming directly from work, dressed casually but respectfully, laughing with the contagious energy characteristic of genuinely happy people, Felipe observed them with an expression that mixed residual apprehension with conscious determination. Good evening and welcome to Le Ciel Bleu. Felipe greeted the group with his characteristically perfect diction, but now loaded with genuine human warmth. There was an almost imperceptible pause, a moment of internal hesitation before he continued with growing confidence. We have an absolutely perfect table prepared for you. Would you like to accompany me? It will be a pleasure to share our new gastronomic journey. One of the young people, visibly surprised and delighted by the warm reception at an establishment with such intimidating reputation, smiled with genuine gratitude. Thank you so much. This is our first time here. We're really impressed. The atmosphere is even more beautiful than we imagined. At that precise moment, something fundamental irreversibly transformed in Felipe's soul. The chronic tension he had carried on his shoulders for years instantly dissolved, replaced by a sensation of purpose and satisfaction he had completely forgotten was possible to experience. Then it will be our absolute honor and privilege to make this first visit of yours truly unforgettable. He responded with a sincerity that surprised him, while guiding the group through the dining room toward the carefully selected table. Felipe found himself explaining the new essence concept with growing enthusiasm that infected not just the clients, but the entire team that observed his transformation with admiration and renewed hope. For the first time in decades of career, Felipe Moreau was experiencing the true essence of hospitality, not the power to exclude or judge, but the deep and genuine joy of welcoming, serving, and creating moments of happiness for other human beings, regardless of who they were or where they came from. 6 months after that stormy night that almost destroyed Le Ciel Bleu, the restaurant received the news it had obsessively pursued for years: the conquest of the third Michelin star, the supreme recognition of worldwide gastronomic excellence. But what made this conquest truly historic wasn't just the exceptional quality of Gabriel Mendes' cuisine. The Michelin Guide, for the first time in its centennial history, dedicated an entire paragraph specifically to the paradigmatic revolution in service and hospitality approach led by Philippe Moreau, who had become a subject of study and admiration in hospitality schools and haute cuisine restaurants around the entire world. Antonio Baresi wrote a follow-up review 6 months later, describing his return experience as the most profound and authentic transformation I've witnessed in 3 decades of professional food criticism. He concluded, Le Ciel Bleu proved that it's possible to achieve the highest technical perfection while keeping the door open to everyone who genuinely appreciates culinary art. The story of Le Ciel Bleu and Felipe Moreau's personal transformation teaches us a fundamental truth about hospitality and, on a broader scale, about human nature itself. True excellence is never fundamentally based on whom we exclude from our lives, but precisely on how we choose to include and welcome others. It's not in the amount of money we charge for our services, but in the generosity and authenticity of what we offer. It doesn't reside in inflexible rigidity with which we follow arbitrary rules, but in the genuine sincerity and human warmth with which we treat every person who crosses our path. When we allow prejudices based on appearances, social status, or economic circumstances to govern our actions, we're not just closing doors of opportunity for others. We're actively building psychological walls around ourselves that prevent us from experiencing the extraordinary richness of true human connection. The next time you enter any establishment, whether it's a Michelin-starred restaurant or a neighborhood diner, remember this story and carry with you this truth. The most important flavor of any gastronomic experience doesn't come from the most expensive ingredients on the plate, but from the humanity, respect, and genuine love with which that experience is shared between human beings. If this transformation journey touched your heart and inspired your soul, show your support by leaving your like. Subscribe to the channel for more stories that celebrate the best of human nature, and share in the comments. What was the most profound and meaningful lesson you extracted from this story of redemption and personal growth? See you in the next video for more adventures that celebrate humanity's infinite capacity to evolve, learn, and become better.